Joseph Moreno and former Assistant US Attorney Kim Whaley. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So, Joseph, if we can start with you, Congress is trying to subpoena the entire report. The Justice Department says that it's premature and unnecessary. What could we actually learn if we saw the full documents?
So this will be the battle in the short term, right? Congress says we're entitled to this. The Justice Department's going to say, no, there are certain procedures we have to follow. I can't just turn it over and just ignore the rules in place. The fact is, this will go to court. A judge will ultimately decide whether or not the court itself has the authority to waive grand jury secrecy rules and turn this information over to Congress. That's the short-term battle. So the longer-term battle, though, is, of course, what does Congress ultimately do with the report and any underlying evidence that is there? That's really the longer-term question that we're looking at here.
Well, and already, Kim, one of the Democratic presidential hopefuls, Elizabeth Warren, has said that Congress should start impeachment proceedings. Did Robert Mueller lay out a roadmap for that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can talk about getting the redacted information, but it's the 480 pages is a lot of data to even process. There's plenty here to take a next step politically, but just like a prosecutor isn't going to bring a criminal case if they can't think they can win it, I don't think a Congress is going to bring an impeachment proceeding unless there can be a conviction in the Senate. And the Senate right now is solidly Republican. So I think this is going to go to November 2020. I think the determination needs to be made by the American public and the voters if this is a man who gets a second term. And the wrinkle there is if he does not get a second term, he's open to indictment as a private citizen because there's a 5-year statute of limitations. If he gets a second term, then by the time he's done with being president, he cannot probably be prosecuted for some of these things, including obstruction, which arguably there's plenty of evidence of obstruction in the report. Problem has to do with the fact that he's a sitting president. That was clear from Mr. Mueller's write-up why he didn't actually make a determination on obstruction.
Well, it's fascinating you talk about the court of public opinion and about Republicans because, Joseph, Senator Mitt Romney has reacted to the Mueller report, which he's read now, by saying that he's sickened by the pervasiveness of dishonesty and misdirection by individuals in the highest office of the land, including the president. So the report has been revealing of behavior that isn't criminal.
Right. Well, so here's the thing. Most of this we knew already, right? Half of it was done in plain sight. The other half we kind of heard through reports and trickles over the past couple of years. So there's nothing in the report that we've seen, at least in my view, that's completely shocking. Most of this behavior by the president in his tweets, at campaign rallies, in statements he's made attacking the investigators, things that went on during the campaign between the campaign officials and Russia, we knew most of that already. And you're right. What this comes down to is never so much a legal question. It's what do we tolerate from our elected officials? It's a political question. What does Congress, and more importantly, what do the American people feel about this information, and how do they react in the ballot box?
Right. And so, Kim, it was interesting. The White House say that they cooperated fully with the report. But when you read it, Mueller says that the president, in his written answers, 30 times couldn't recall key incidents. And, of course, he never sat for an in-person interview. So what do you make of that failure to recollect key moments?
Well, I worked on the Whitewater investigation, and as part of that, I did a very thorough analysis of perjury, and it's actually, that is a quite effective response to, if you don't want to answer a question, I can't recall. It's very hard to prove that that person perjured himself. But I think all of this sort of tinkering around about, well, the president was upset about the investigation, and they were responsive, that doesn't evade the facts. This man, for example, directed his White House counsel to tell Rod Rosenstein to fire the person in charge of the investigation. That is, I think, as a matter of prima facie, what we say straight up reading of the obstruction statute, that is endeavoring to take a step that interferes and is likely to interfere with the investigation. Certainly firing the top prosecutor would interfere with the criminal investigation. So I think these are arguments you'd make maybe as a defense lawyer at a trial, but they really don't change the facts that are in the Mueller report.
Yeah, and Kim raised a good point, too, about sort of, how some of this has been communicated and how much did the White House really cooperate. The Attorney General somewhat walked into an unforced error here because he could have simply taken the report with minimal narrative and said, here it is. There are certain things I have to redact by law. That's fine, but I'm not going to sort of editorialize. By him making statements like the White House was fully cooperative, and then when we read the report, it says, well, not quite really. They may have waived executive privilege. They may have turned over documents, but the president would not sit down for an interview. The answers he gave were not necessarily adequate, and there was a lot of I don't remember. So that Perhaps the Attorney General felt he was bringing some finality, some closure here, but he sort of raised more questions than he's answered.
Indeed so. Joseph Moreno, Kim Whaley, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.